thinking he'd get rich, but the Apache widow owned the land beneath him. The sun dipped low over the dry, endless plains, casting a golden hue over the rugged land. Tom Colby had been working on his small ranch for years. The cattle were lean, the barn needed repairs, and the soil was stubborn. His father's land was never the richest, but Tom worked it like he had something to prove. The dream of wealth, though, always danced in the back of his mind. It was a Saturday evening when Tom's life started to change. After another long day in the fields, he found himself at Maddie's bar, nursing a drink to cool the dust from his throat. He was a regular. No one knew the land better than Tom, or so he thought. There was nothing special about his life, just hard work and lonely nights, but tonight was different. The bar was filled with the usual crowd, ranchers, cowboys, and a few travelers passing through. As he took a seat by the window, the TV in the corner flashed the numbers for the lottery drawing. The group around him started talking about how lucky it would be to win. Tom didn't usually bother with the lottery, but that night, for some reason, he felt like trying his luck. "I'll take a ticket," he said to Maddie, the bartender. "Feeling lucky, Tom?" she asked, handing him a slip of paper. "I guess so," he replied with a half-hearted laugh. Tom didn't think much about it after that. He tucked the ticket into his shirt pocket and went about his business. The night passed quickly, and soon it was time to head home. He was too tired to think about the numbers, or even the ticket in his pocket. As he made his way back to the ranch, the wind whipped through the dusty streets, reminding him of the harsh life he led. The next day, Tom woke early. It was a Saturday, and he had work to do. He stepped outside, feeling the morning chill in the air, and set to work feeding the cattle. His mind was on the usual tasks, mending fences, checking water troughs, but something tugged at the back of his mind. The lottery. He headed to the little convenience store down the road for his morning coffee and, on a whim, checked the numbers. He pulled out the ticket and read them aloud. 214, 18, 23, 35, 40. His eyes widened in disbelief. The numbers matched. He stared at the ticket for a long time, then checked the numbers again. He was sure he was seeing things. But no, the ticket was right, and so were the numbers. Tom had won. The lump in his throat grew, and his heart raced as he slowly processed the incredible news.
He had just won millions of dollars. He could finally fix his ranch.
No more worrying about how to make ends meet, no more struggling to repair everything that had been falling apart for years. Tom's first thought was to tell someone, but who? No one would believe it, but the thought of it, the power that came with that piece of paper, was overwhelming. He rushed back to his ranch to check his bank account and see the news online. He sat at his small kitchen table, staring at the computer screen. The numbers confirmed it. Tom Colby had just won the lottery, and the sum was enough to change his life forever. He thought about all the things he could do. Maybe he would move into a bigger house, build a real barn, buy new cattle. He could stop worrying about his crops dying in the drought. He could take his time, fixing things up, buying the equipment he needed, and even expanding. His mind was spinning with possibilities. And as the day stretched on, he began to make plans. The first thing he would do was hire a lawyer to make sure everything was official. Then he would purchase more land, a bigger ranch, maybe even build a few homes. He could bring his family to the ranch, live comfortably, and leave behind all the hardship. Tom knew what he had to do. He had to act fast, before anyone else could get their hands on the money. He called a lawyer who specialized in land and real estate, eager to secure his future. The lawyer advised him to hold off for a day or two, to avoid anyone finding out too soon. But Tom didn't want to wait. He couldn't wait. After making arrangements, Tom set out to buy land. He drove through town with a sense of confidence he hadn't had before. He made his way to the real estate office, where he was greeted by a sharp-looking man named Rick, who was eager to assist him. "What can I do for you today?" Rick asked, looking Tom over with a calculating glance. He must have thought Tom had come into some money, but Tom didn't care. He was ready to make a deal. "Good land." "I'm looking to expand," Tom said, his voice firm. Rick smiled, seeing the opportunity in front of him. "Of course, we have some prime plots available. Let me show you." But one plot caught Tom's eye. It was perfect, acres of fertile land, perfect for raising cattle and planting crops. It was in the right location, close enough to town, but far enough away to give him privacy. He had to have it. "I'll take it," Tom said, his voice steady with conviction. Rick looked at him, surprised. "Just like that? Well, I'll get the paperwork started for you." As Tom signed the papers, he felt a wave of satisfaction. This was it. He was about to become a man of means. No more struggling. The land was his. But when Rick looked over the documents again, his face dropped. "Mr. Colby," Rick said, "there's something you should know." "What's the problem?" land, Rick said slowly, is already spoken for. What do you mean? Tom asked, confusion starting to settle in. He had just signed the papers. How could it be taken from him? Rick handed him a set of papers with another name on them, Elda Redstone. This land was claimed by her. It's been in her family for generations. There was no way he had just won the lottery. How could anyone else own this land? But as he looked at the papers, he saw it. Elda Redstone, Apache widow. His thoughts raced. How could he have overlooked this? The land he had just bought, his dream, was already owned by her. The sun hung low in the sky as Tom Colby sat in his truck, staring at the papers in his hand. The land he had just bought, his ticket to a new life, was not his after all. The documents he held in his hands bore the name Elda Redstone, and he couldn't make sense of it. Apache widow. How had he missed this? Tom had spent his whole life on this land, struggling day after day to make ends meet. He'd worked long hours, broken his back, and yet the dream of success had always felt just out of reach. Now, the one thing he thought would change everything was slipping through his fingers. His heart beat heavily in his chest. He hadn't expected to face something like this. The lawyer had given him a runaround, telling him everything would be fine, but now everything seemed wrong. He drove out of town, his mind racing. The day was waning, but he didn't care. He needed answers. Tom knew he needed to speak to Elda Redstone, the woman who, as he'd just learned, owned the land beneath his feet. He wasn't sure how to approach her. His whole life had been about working with what he had, but this was different. This wasn't just a piece of land, this was a legacy. He took a deep breath as his truck rumbled down the dusty dirt road. He was about to confront a woman who had every right to the land he thought was his. What did she want with it? She was a widow, alone on the outskirts of town. What did she need with more land? Tom drove until he saw her small cabin in the distance. It was simple, but well kept, nestled against the backdrop of the rugged desert. Her land stretched out before her, and Tom could see the vastness of it. He slowed down as he pulled up to her front gate. The wind kicked up dust as he climbed out of the truck and walked toward her door. The moment he knocked, the door opened. A woman with strong features, dressed in simple clothes, stood before him. She was older than he expected, perhaps in her late 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through him. "I'm Tom Colby," he said, his voice rough. I need to talk to you about the land. I just bought it. But the papers say you own it." Elda's eyes narrowed as she studied him. She had a quiet strength to her, an aura of calm that contrasted with the storm brewing inside Tom. "Come in," she said after a moment, stepping aside to allow him to enter. Inside, the cabin was small but comfortable. The air was thick with the scent of wood and earth. Elda gestured for him to sit at the small table near the window where sunlight streamed in. Tom hesitated but then sat down. Elda sat across from him, folding her hands. She was waiting for him to speak, but Tom didn't know what to say. His thoughts were still tangled in confusion, frustration, and a bit of shame. "Why didn't you say something?" Tom finally blurted out. "The land, it's mine. I just won the lottery. I thought it was all settled. I don't understand." Elda didn't flinch at his outburst. She simply stared at him with steady, unblinking eyes. "The land has always been mine," she said softly. "It was passed down to me from my ancestors. I inherited it after my husband died." Tom's face tightened. "But why didn't you claim it sooner? Why wait until now to show up? I don't understand why you're here, why you want this land so badly." Elda didn't answer right away. She stood and walked over to a small cabinet. From inside, she pulled out an old, weathered box. She placed it on the table in front of him. It was simple, but it had a certain weight to it. As she opened the box, Tom could see the yellowing documents inside. She slid one out and handed it to him. "These are the papers from my grandfather," Elda explained. "They were signed by the leaders of the tribe, giving our people the rights to this land. The land has always been ours. It wasn't just my husband's or mine." Tom took the papers, turning them over in his hands. The ink was faded, the parchment fragile, but the names and markings were still legible. His fingers traced over the old writing, and a chill ran down his spine. There was no denying it. This land didn't belong to him. "You don't have to believe me, but it's the truth," Elda said quietly. "This land was meant to be kept in the family. We are its stewards, not its owners. There's a difference." Tom looked at her. He wanted to argue, to insist, that the papers he'd signed meant something, but the truth was in front of him. Elda's calm demeanor made it clear. There was nothing he could say that would change her mind. He set the papers down on the table, his mind racing. What do you want from me? I just thought that if I had the money, I could make something better of my life. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Elda's eyes softened for the first time. Money doesn't change the land, Tom. It only changes the way we see it. You were born with a dream, but I was born with a responsibility. We're different, but that doesn't mean we can't find a way to work together. Tom didn't know what to say. He had never thought of it that way before. His mind kept flashing to the lottery winnings. He could have anything he wanted. But what did he really want? Do you think you can just take the land from me because of a piece of paper? Elda asked, her voice now stern. It doesn't work that way. This land isn't for sale. It was never meant to be. He could feel the anger bubbling inside him, but there was also a sense of helplessness that he couldn't ignore. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I won the lottery. I thought this was it, you know? But I didn't think it would lead to this. Elda rose slowly, her gaze steady. Sometimes winning isn't about money. It's about understanding what you already have. You've worked hard for what's yours, Tom, but this land is more than just a plot of earth. You can't just take it and expect everything to change. Left Elda's cabin feeling more lost than ever. He'd come to confront her, but instead, she'd given him a lesson he wasn't prepared for. As he drove back to his ranch, the weight of the land, of his future, hung heavy in the air. He had to face the fact that everything he thought he knew about wealth, about ownership, and about the land was wrong. It wasn't just about money. There was a deeper meaning to this place, and Elda wasn't going to let him forget it. The days following his confrontation with Elda Redstone felt like a blur to Tom. His mind raced with questions, and the more he thought about the land, the more frustrated he became. He had been so sure that the lottery win would solve everything, that it would make him rich, that he would have the power to shape his future. Instead, he had found himself facing a woman who had nothing but quiet determination. She wasn't just a widow. She was the keeper of something much larger than money. Tom had spent most of his life alone. His father had left him the ranch, but it had never been enough to escape the harshness of the world. He had never learned to share. He worked hard, and his efforts had been his alone. But now, he realized that everything was different. Elda had something he didn't. A deep, undeniable connection to the land. A connection that no amount of money could buy. The nights were the hardest. Tom lay awake in his small bed, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the wind howling outside. He thought about what Elda had said, about the land being in her family for generations, about her ancestors' ties to it. He had felt her quiet strength when he had stood in her cabin, and he couldn't deny that there was something sacred about what she was protecting. He didn't want to admit it, but it seemed that the land didn't belong to him, no matter how much he wanted it to. His father had never cared about heritage. He had cared only about working the land and getting by. Tom had followed in those footsteps, but now it felt like those footsteps were leading him nowhere. One morning, after a restless night, Tom decided he needed to do something about it. He couldn't just sit around and wait for things to resolve themselves. He had to act. He drove out to Elda's cabin again. His mind was made up. He didn't know what exactly he hoped to achieve, but he knew he had to speak with her again. Maybe there was a way to work together. Maybe they could find a solution. But he was prepared to hear her say no. He was prepared for another rejection. As he arrived at her cabin, Tom felt a strange sense of calm. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the desert landscape. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elda was already outside, standing by the fence that marked the edge of her property. She was looking out over the land, her posture straight and proud, her face calm as always. Tom approached slowly, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind shifted, and Tom could feel the dust on his skin. It was a familiar feeling, but today it seemed to carry more weight than it ever had before. "I've been thinking," Tom said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was a certain vulnerability in it that he couldn't hide. Elda turned to him, her eyes softening but still guarded. "What about?" "I've been thinking about what you said," he continued. "About the land. About how it's been in your family for generations. I understand now that this isn't just some piece of property. It's more than that. I want to make it right. I want to work with you, not against you." Elda studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Tom could tell that she wasn't sure if she should believe him, but there was something in her gaze that told him she was willing to listen. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice low. "I am," Tom replied. "I've never really understood what the land meant to people, not the way you do. But I want to learn. I want to protect it too." I don't want to destroy it. I'm not looking for a fight. Elda nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. It's not just about the land, she said softly. It's about who we are. This land has stories, Tom. It's part of us. It's not something you can own, and it's not something you can buy with money. But if you want to protect it, then maybe we can find a way. How? We start by respecting it, Elda said. We start by understanding what's been here long before we arrived. If you're willing to do that, maybe we can work together. But don't think that you can just take it. It's not for sale. I don't want to take it. I just want to make things right. Maybe we can find a way to protect it together. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to try. For the first time, Elda gave him a small, hesitant smile. It wasn't a smile of joy, but it was the closest thing to approval that Tom had seen from her. We'll start small, but you need to know that this won't be easy, and it won't be fast. This land has seen a lot of change, and it's not something you can fix overnight. I understand, Tom said. I'm ready to learn. Over the next few days, Tom spent time with Elda, learning about the history of the land. She took him on long walks, showing him the landmarks that had been important to her ancestors. She told him stories of her people, of the struggles they had faced, and the deep spiritual connection they had with the earth. Tom listened, and for the first time in his life he began to see the land in a new light. It wasn't just dirt and rocks to work with. It was alive. There were stories in every tree, every stone, every piece of earth, and Elda's people had been its guardians long before the settlers ever arrived. But even as Tom learned more, the reality of the situation began to sink in. There were forces beyond their control, developers, ranchers, and others who saw the land only as something to be exploited. It wasn't enough to simply care for it. They needed to find a way to protect it from the encroaching world. One evening, as the two of them sat around a campfire, Tom spoke his mind. I think I know what we need to do. It's not just about learning and respecting the land. We have to stop the others from taking it. We need to fight for it. Elda looked at him carefully, the flames dancing in her eyes. It's not just about fighting. It's about standing together. If we want to protect this land, we need more than just words. We need action. Tom nodded, his determination growing. I'll do whatever it takes. I've seen what this land can mean. I won't let anyone take it from us. And for the first time, Tom felt like he wasn't alone in the fight. Together, he and Elda would face the future, ready to protect what they both cherished. The land, its stories, and the legacy that bound them to it. The days passed slowly after Tom's decision to work with Elda. Every morning he woke up with a new sense of purpose, but it wasn't easy. The land wasn't just something to care for. It was a living, breathing entity, and understanding it took time. Elda taught him the importance of patience, and Tom found himself listening to the wind more, feeling the earth beneath his boots, and watching the way the cattle moved across the land. It wasn't just about managing it anymore. It was about protecting it, honoring it, and sharing it with the future. Despite Tom's new commitment to the land, there were still challenges. The outside world hadn't slowed down. Developers, eager to expand and build new homes and businesses, were moving closer. They saw the land as a commodity, something to tear up, reshape, and sell for profit. They didn't care about the stories the land held, the generations it had supported, or the people who had protected it for centuries. They only saw a market opportunity. One afternoon, as Tom and Elda sat on the porch of her cabin, the sound of distant engines grew louder. The noise, familiar but unwelcome, signaled the arrival of the developers. A convoy of trucks kicked up a thick cloud of dust as they made their way across the horizon. Elda's eyes narrowed, and Tom's heart sank. He had known this day was coming. The developers had been circling, waiting for the right moment to make their move. But seeing them now, it was clear that they weren't here to negotiate. Are you ready? Elda asked, her voice calm but firm. Tom stood, a sense of determination flooding through him. I'm ready.
We'll stop them.
We have to. They knew the fight wouldn't be easy. But they also knew that they weren't alone. The land wasn't just important to them. It was important to the community. As word spread, neighbors who had once seen Tom as just another rancher began to rally behind him. People who had worked the land for years, who had grown up listening to the stories, came to help. They weren't just fighting for a plot of land. They were fighting for the history, the culture, and the future of their children. Tom and Elda stood at the edge of the land, facing the developers who had now gathered at the gates. There was no turning back. Tom took a deep breath and stepped forward, Elda by his side. The developers stood in front of their machines, wearing suits that gleamed in the sunlight, holding briefcases filled with contracts and promises. "We're here to make a deal," one of the developers, a tall man with a sharp jaw, said. He glanced at the papers in his hands. "This land is valuable, and we've made an offer that will benefit everyone." Tom took a step forward, his voice steady but strong. "This land isn't for sale. It's not about money. It's about what's right. This land has been in Elda's family for generations, and we're not letting you take it." The developer raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by Tom's resistance. "You're making a mistake. With the kind of money we're offering, you could buy all the land around here, and you'd never have to worry about anything again. Think of the future. The future isn't about selling out. It's about protecting what matters. This land belongs to the people who care for it, not to the highest bidder. We won't let you tear it apart." Elda stepped forward, her presence calm but commanding. "This land has a history. It has a soul. It's not just dirt and rocks. You can't put a price on that." The developer sneered, clearly not understanding what they were talking about. He glanced at his colleagues, who stood quietly behind him. "Well, then, I suppose we'll have to take this to court." "You can take it wherever you want," Tom replied, "but this land isn't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone." The developers hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. They had expected an easy deal, a quick win, but what they were hearing was something they didn't know how to fight. They had underestimated Tom and Elda, thinking they were just two people standing in the way of progress. But they weren't just standing in the way. They were standing for something far bigger. Finally, the developer nodded and turned away. "We'll be in touch," he said, clearly not pleased with the outcome. He motioned for his team to follow him, and they retreated, leaving Tom and Elda standing on the land they had fought for. As the dust settled and the trucks faded into the distance, Tom felt a weight lift off his shoulders. They had won. Not just a battle, but the future of the land. Elda turned to him with a small, approving smile. "You did well." There would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had Elda, and together they had the community behind them. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the land seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The cattle grazed peacefully in the fields, and the wind rustled gently through the trees. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt at peace. He stood beside Elda, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. It wasn't just the land that had changed. It was him. He had come to understand that true wealth wasn't about money. It was about what you fought for, what you protected, and the legacy you left behind. Tom had thought that winning the lottery would be the answer to all his problems. But in the end, it wasn't the money that had changed his life. It was the connection to the land, to Elda, and to the community. It was the realization that sometimes the greatest victories weren't the ones you fought for yourself. They were the ones you fought for the greater good. As Tom and Elda stood together looking out over the land, they knew that the future was still uncertain, but they were ready for whatever came next. They had fought for this land, and they would continue to fight for it, not with money, but with honor, respect, and a shared love for the earth beneath their feet. And as the night wrapped around them, with the stars shining above and the land stretched out below, Tom felt more at home than he had ever felt before. This land was his, not because he had bought it, but because he had earned it. He had become part of something far bigger than himself. And, for the first time in his life, he understood what it truly meant to be rich.